Hi, welcome to another IELTS writing video. In this video, we're going to look at how to describe age range in your academic Task 1 response. If you find this video helpful, visit my blog at ielts.com and join us at the forum ieltsnetwork.com. So in this lesson, we're addressing something that is a challenge for many IELTS candidates, and that is how to make reference to age groups when they appear in your academic Task 1 question. So here on the screen we have an example question, and this data source presents the smoking percentages among Scottish female demographics between the years 2003 and 2005. And the data is organized by age groups. So we have 16 to 24-year-olds, 25 to 34-year-olds, 35 to 44-year-olds, 45 to 59-year-olds, 60 to 74-year-olds, and those women that are 75 years and older. Now, in this lesson, I will not be writing the response from start to finish, but rather I want to show you some grammatically sound ways to make reference to these different groups when you do go to write your Task 1 response. The group 75 years and older is worded slightly differently simply because we are not given the ending age in this group, so it's sort of 75 and beyond. So I will deal with wording this group separately. But these other groups are all grammatically referred to in the same manner. So for the sake of this video, we're going to look at the 25 to 34-year-old group, and I will show you various ways that you can make reference to this group. And just note that the examples that I'm sharing here can be applied to these other groups as well, every group except for this 75 years plus. Okay. So the first way that we could refer to this group is shown in this underlined phrase. Rates of smoking among females 25 to 34 years old appear to decline over the 3 years in question. So if we look at the way it's worded here, so we start with a noun, and I could replace this noun with something else. So I could say rates of smoking among women 25 to 34 years old. Or if I had made reference to Scottish women perhaps in the sentence prior, I could say those. So rates of smoking among those 25 to 34 years old. And I could dress this up a little bit. So I could say Scottish females. So I think that sometimes students get a little bit confused when they're using years old versus year olds. And if I were to write year-olds, this would not be grammatically correct because it reads awkwardly. We have a noun here and then we have another noun, so it would be grammatically incorrect. So this would have to be Scottish females 25 to 34 years old. Now, to share the example of year-olds, the wording would be rates of smoking among 25 to 34-year-olds show a steady decline over the 3 years in question. Okay, so here you see we have not included any sort of noun to begin this with. We don't say women 25 to 34-year-olds. That would be incorrect, and we could not word it that way. I could dress this up, though, by saying Scottish 25 to 34-year-olds. That would be fine. Okay, another way to refer to the age group could be rates of smoking among 25 to 34-year-old women. And so here, this is not years old, it's not year-olds women, it's just year-old women. And so year-old is operating as an adjective here, and this is modifying women. So we could change this to year-old, I guess females, that might be kind of, it's not so colloquially accurate, but women would be fine, or Scottish women. Okay, show a steady decline over the 3 years in question. Another possible wording could be rates of smoking among women between 25 and 34 years old appear to decline over the 3 years in question. Now, in this example, we're using the word between, and candidates often make the mistake of coupling between with to, because we often say 25 to 34, as we did in these earlier examples, right? 25 to 34 years old, year old. But when we use between, we couple this with and. Okay, so this could again be Scottish women between 25 and 34 years old appear to decline over the 3 years in question. So another way that you could make reference to this age group. Okay, rates of smoking among women aged 25 to 34 years old appear to decline over the 3 years in question. Okay, so here we're making reference with aged 25 to 34 years old. We could dress it up further and perhaps say young adults, I guess. Young adults, age 25 to 34 years old, that would be fine too. Okay, now to make reference to the age group that is 75 years of age and older, we have to deal with this a little bit differently because, as I mentioned, we don't have the ending age in this within this age group. So we know that it starts at 75, but we don't know, what the cutoff age is, because the cutoff age is an unknown. It's death. And so we could word this: 13% of women 75 years of age and older smoked between 2003 and 2004. And again, I'm using the between here, as you see, coupling it with and. 13% of women 75 and older, which would also be grammatically correct, smoked between 2003 and 2004. 13% of women aged 75 and older smoked between 2003 and 2004. And 13% of women older than 74 smoked between 2003 and 2004. Okay, and the same would be true if we were dealing with the other side of the spectrum, which would be perhaps an age that starts from birth and maybe goes to, say, 12 or something like that. We might reference that as women younger than 12 or girls younger than 12. Okay, now another thing I want to address in this video is the use of labels. So candidates often label age groups in ways that are ambiguous and not in keeping with the data source. For example, labels like babies or young people, teenagers, young adults, middle-aged people, and the elderly. These labels are fine, except that when we go to reference data in a data source like this one, we would have to include the age. So simply saying the elderly is not enough to make reference to this age group, okay? Because the elderly is kind of an ambiguous term. I mean, there's no set number when the term elderly begins. Some people might define it as someone who's 70 years old and older, or perhaps even 80 years old and older. So just simply saying 13% of the elderly smoked between 2003 and 2004, that would not be entirely accurate because the word elderly is not specific enough to allow the reader to pinpoint the exact information you're making reference to. So I've shared a couple of examples that would be incorrect. Okay, and then I want to talk with you about why these are incorrect. So as I was mentioning, 13% of the elderly smoked between 2003 and 2004. So this would not be correct. We would have to change this to 13% of women 75 and older smoked, I guess I can take this out, smoked between 2003 and 2004. Now, I could use the word elderly in the next sentence if I connect it back to the sentence prior. So here we've already stated that we're talking about women 75 and older. Okay, so I might say I could continue talking about this group by referencing this elderly demographic shrunk to 11% in 2005. Okay, so now writing it this way would be accurate, and that is because we're using the word "this" to link the idea of an elderly demographic. Well, what elderly demographic are we talking about? We're talking about the specific demographic that starts at 75 and moves up. So in this sense, then it would be a grammatically accurate progression. But if we were to just reference the elderly, that would not be correct. Now, I should also point out that what I am saying here, of course, if the data source listed the demographics using these labels, so for example, instead of listing age groups, it was to list teenagers. So it doesn't say 16 to 24, it says teenagers, this and that. Well, that's different. Then you would be referencing what you see in the data source. But today we're talking about referencing groups of ages. Okay, so I hope we're clear on that. So I think that brief video should help clear up any confusion that you have regarding describing an age group, making reference to an age group. I encourage you now to sit for 10 minutes and rewrite these example sentences yourself. Make sure that you get the progression and the pattern ingrained in your memory so that when you go to write your task 1 response that you're able to write references to age groups accurately. So I hope that video was helpful. Thank you for watching and have a nice evening.